Hey, Joe McLean here from CatholicHack.com, and welcome to my brand new video series called Saints and Sinners and what they can do to teach us to be better men, better husbands, and better fathers. In this first video, we're going to go all the way back to 4th century northern Italy, and we're going to dive into the life, ever so briefly, to Saint Ambrose of Milan. The year is 340 AD, and we're not actually in Italy. In fact, we're in Germany, up on the border to Luxembourg in Trier. This is where Ambrose is born, into a very wealthy family. Ambrose, his father, was the governor of a large piece of territory, basically everything north of the Alps, Germany, France, Britain, all the way over to Spain. But unfortunately for Ambrose, his dad didn't live very long. So once he dies, mom packs up the kids and moves back to Rome, and that's where Ambrose is raised. He follows in his father's footsteps, studying the law and rhetoric, and he gets to the point in 372 AD where he's influencing all the right people in Rome. In fact, they're recommending him to Valentinian I, the Western Roman Emperor, for the position of the consular prefect of a piece of territory in the northern part of Italy, and he would be basically setting up shop in Milan. Now this is huge. You see, Milan was the seat of power in the Western Roman Empire. No longer was it in Rome. It had moved years before. So this was big to-doings for Ambrose. He dives into this position, and you can see very early on how his leadership style, his rhetoric is impressing people. He's winning the hearts and minds of the subjects within his territory. But 2 years into it, 374 AD, trouble brews in Milan. The diocese there becomes vacant when the bishop dies, right? So essentially you have the Arian heretics trying to put their guy in the position, and the Christians, the Catholic Christians, trying to get an Orthodox bishop in there as well. So they're fighting over this, and Ambrose does not want to see bloodshed. So he basically goes to where the trouble is, and he starts to exhort the crowd to act like Christians. I know, it's a novel concept, right? You see, Ambrose was not baptized. He was a professing Christian, basically a catechumen studying the faith, but he never actually was baptized. Kind of like Constantine. You know, they get baptized on their deathbed, the last possible moment. So Ambrose was Christian, but he never really took it serious. And it was in this moment where he is exhorting the crowd to remain calm and work this thing out that some young person from the crowd looks up and says, "Ambrose, Bishop!" And then all of a sudden the crowd starts cheering, "Ambrose, Bishop! Ambrose, Bishop!" And he's like, no, time out. No, I'm not even baptized. You can't do this. And everybody was like, you're the guy. Because see, to them, he wasn't quite Christian and he wasn't Arian, so he's maybe a perfect fit for everybody in between. So Ambrose is like, no, I don't think so. And he runs and he hides in the house of a friend. But as soon as the word gets back to Valentinian, Valentinian basically takes this as affirmation, a compliment, if you will, of his ability to pick the right guy. He was quite impressed with himself. So Valentinian approves the whole procedure, and they proceed to vote Ambrose in as bishop. Once the word gets out, the guy allowing Ambrose to hide in his house gives him up over to the people. Ambrose has nowhere to go at this point. He's a very wealthy man, so he ends up giving all of his money away to the poor, except he does reserve some for the care and well-being of his older sister, who was essentially a professed religious nun by that point. And so Ambrose is ordained a deacon and a priest, and a week later, on December 7th, 374 AD, he is made bishop of Milan. Now, Ambrose immediately recognizes one of the biggest problems he's facing. He doesn't really have, the knowledge necessary to really be a good bishop. So he dives into studying theology and scripture and really wanting to, master these subjects in order to be the best worthy bishop he can possibly be. And in fact, he does accomplish this because he is made a doctor of the church, and we can read many of his incredibly powerful writings still today. I link to them below. You should check them out. But, Ambrose also proved himself to be a worthy bishop in many other ways. He basically went and confronted these emperors on many occasions, showing us his leadership, showing us his courage and his fortitude to do the right thing, even if it meant he had to go toe-to-toe with the most powerful people on the planet. A couple of good examples. Once Valentinian I died, he leaves two sons behind, Gratian in the north and Valentinian II for Italy and northern Africa. Now, Valentinian II was a very young boy, and so his mother basically ruled for him. His mother's name was Justina. Now, Justina and Valentinian II were Arians, and so they didn't get along with Ambrose, because by this point, after studying theology and the church's teaching, Ambrose made it his personal mission to help rid the Western Empire of the Arian heresy. So they were basically going at it. And Justina had convinced her son, Valentinian II, to confiscate the basilica outside of Milan. Well, Ambrose was like, no, I'm sorry, we're not doing that. Thank you, but no thank you. So then Justina came up with a bigger plan. She said, fine, if you won't give me the one outside, I'll take the bigger one inside the Basilica of the Apostles. Now, this is about 383 AD. Now, Ambrose was definitely not going to have any part of this. I will not give a church over to heretics for idolatry. Thank you, but no thank you. So Ambrose is basically occupying the basilica, and when the soldiers first arrive to take the building away from him, they put down their arms and they go inside and they pray with Ambrose. You see, that's the kind of leader Ambrose was. He inspired the people. He provided them what the emperor couldn't provide, real authentic leadership, and they really soaked that up. So they loved Ambrose, and so the people flocked to his aid, and they helped to occupy the basilica, and the soldiers were ordered to take up a perimeter around, sort of like a siege almost in many ways, and Ambrose led the people in hymns and worship and the like, but he was careful. He knew he had the ear and the heart and the minds of the people, but he didn't want to incite violence. This was very important for Ambrose, to lead the people in an authentic and courageous way, but not in a violent way. Now, the funny thing is, while this is going on, the older brother Valentinian I leaves behind Gratian in the north. He is murdered by a usurper named Maximus. And so Maximus is sort of thinking of invading in northern Italy and wiping out Justina and her son Valentinian II. So they're sitting there thinking, let's see, who could we send who has the skill to convince people and keep this guy at bay and keep him from coming down south? Ambrose! Let's send Ambrose. So basically they're begging and pleading with Ambrose to come to their rescue and talk this guy off the ledge of invading northern Italy. Ambrose goes. This is the most, Ambrose, this is a guy who's having to fight with these very people to keep his basilica before they give it over to heretics. And when they call for his help, he goes. That's the kind of Christian bishop this man was, always trying to do the right thing. So he goes and he meets with Maximus, and he convinces Maximus to not invade. Well, Maximus is basically content for the time being in the north. And Ambrose comes back to Milan. It's back to the same old thing. Justina's trying to take the basilica, and he's trying to keep her off at bay. Now, Justina makes his life very difficult. She basically makes it illegal to have Christian worship. But Ambrose ignores this, and he preaches fervently. He was an incredible preacher. People flocked to his basilica on Sunday to hear him preach and to be there for his Holy Mass. Now, in about 386, something impressive really happens in Ambrose's life. The Justina and Valentinian had brought in a hired gun, somebody they thought was sure to be the match for the magnificent Ambrose in his speech and his rhetoric, right? Well, it didn't work out. This young man actually started to come and to speak and meet with Ambrose and to hear him preach on Sundays. And lo and behold, in 386 AD, he was baptized into the Catholic Church. His name is Augustine. Yeah, Saint Augustine, one of the other great incredible saints of our church. Now, Augustine, he'll go on to write incredible works, The City of God, the Confessions, many, many other homilies and incredible works that we can read today. So this was probably one of Ambrose's more famous converts, to be sure. So that didn't work. But, okay, so things are heating up. Maximus is in the north, and he's trying to come down. He's decided, yes, I do want to invade and take over. And by this point, they call on Ambrose to go back up there. But he does go, but it doesn't really work. And so Justina and Valentinian II flee to Thessalonica, where Theodosius, he is the emperor to the east, to the eastern part of the Roman Empire. They flee to Theodosius and beg Theodosius, please, please, come to our rescue. Theodosius takes them up on the offer. He goes to war with Maximus. He kills Maximus and restores Justina and Valentinian to their territories. But essentially, at this point in the game, Theodosius is the one emperor of all of Rome at this point. So Theodosius successfully welds the two halves back together. First time in so many years. It was quite incredible. And the good news is Theodosius is a Christian. He's not a heretic. So you'd think that he and Ambrose are going to get along swimmingly, but you know, you're going to see here in a second that that's not necessarily the case. Theodosius comes to Milan to try to convince Justina and Valentinian II of the error of their Arian ways and to support Ambrose as the authentic Christian bishop. Theodosius shows up to the basilica to go to Holy Mass on a Sunday with Ambrose there presiding and preaching, and he stays in the sanctuary. He's sort of lingering in the sanctuary, and Ambrose is like, I'm sorry, is there something we can do for you? Can we help you with anything? And Theodosius says, oh, I'm going to serve at the altar. I'm going to help you at the altar like we do back east. And Ambrose sends the deacon over and says, Your Excellency, I'm sorry, but the purple robe makes princes, not priests. Your role is with the lay people out there. Could you imagine the audacity of this bishop to send away the emperor from within the sanctuary to stand, shoulder to shoulder with the lay people? And this is the brilliancy of this man and this moment in time. With Ambrose, we learn very clearly that the emperor is within the church, not over the church. There is a proper role for the emperor, and it is not to govern the church. Very significant. And keep in mind, at this point in time, there are no pews. When you go to Holy Mass at this point, you are standing with the rich, with the poor, and everybody in between. This puts everybody on an equal plane. Now, to Theodosius' credit, he apologizes and in humility does accept his place among the lay people. I think that's a good nod to the character of Theodosius. He's generally a good guy, but we will see he's got a problem that he's tempted with the power of his position. Well, we see an occasion of this in 390 AD when in Thessalonica, or Thessaloniki, however you like to say it, there was a riot in town. You see, the governor had arrested the chief charioteer. This is like the #1 star athlete, right? This is the big guy, and he was arrested because he had seduced a slave woman within his house and thrown into prison, right? Well, the people of the town were like they did not like this. They wanted their star athlete back. They wanted to see him racing in the arena. Well, when they didn't get what they wanted, they rioted and they stoned the governor to death, and this really upset Theodosius. So Theodosius hatches a plan for revenge. He puts out the decree and calls all the inhabitants into the arena, only they're not there to see the races. Instead, they find the soldiers with the swords, and 7,000 people are slaughtered. Now, it is said that Theodosius regrets this choice and tried to turn it all around. Unfortunately, his countermand order did not get to the soldiers in time, and the massacre had already taken place. So you can see he has regret and he wishes he had not done this. But so once this gets back to Ambrose, he writes a personal letter to the emperor, exhorting him to repent of his crime and his sin and to perform public penance. You see, many innocent people were murdered here. This is not a good thing. His soul is in danger. Like a good bishop who cares for his flock, the care of the souls of those entrusted to him, he must do what's right even if that thing is painful and uncomfortable and difficult. This bishop is going to do it no matter what. Now, Ambrose, in other occasions, in going head-to-head with Theodosius, had publicly preached against him to his face in front of other people at Holy Mass. So Ambrose never shrunk from his task of correcting the emperors when it required him to do so. But in this case, he writes a private letter. He wants Theodosius to really reflect on what he's done and to make the right choice here. Now, to Theodosius' credit, he does in fact repent, and he does in fact perform public penance. Now, he was barred from communion until he did so. So this is a great example of the bishop of the church taking extreme measure in order to try to get the right outcome out of this, essentially preventing this lay politician from receiving Holy Communion until he had repented of his sin, which he in fact did. Now, in 395 AD, when Theodosius dies, it is Ambrose who preaches at his funeral mass, basically, showing us the care he did have for this man and the respect that he had for this man as well, for knowing that he did error, for accepting it, for admitting it, and doing the right thing. Now, Ambrose himself receives his final communion, his last rites, on Good Friday of 397 AD and dies shortly thereafter. So what we see is a life, although it's been a brief look at his life, we see the life of a courageous man who gave everything he had back to God. And even though God asked something of him that he wasn't quite sure he wanted for himself, he trusted God and he heard the words of Christ in his ear. He who loses his life will find it. Right? And so he follows Christ into this role and he heroically performs his duty, being courageous and faithful and persevering through trials and through troubles, caring for those people whom the Lord has placed into his care and to his custody. And I really think that there's a lot there that I can personally reflect on about as a husband, as a father, that I should also learn to be courageous. I should also learn to be faithful to the church and not just give in to the times, when people say, well, most people like this and most people believe this and most people say it's okay to do this, that, and the other thing, but instead to be like Ambrose and to remain steadfast and true to the church's teaching and be courageous. And when there's something that needs to get done, no matter how painful or difficult it may be, that I am called to do it, to provide solid leadership for my wife and for my children, to give them what they really need. This is the role that God has given to us as men, to be leaders, protectors, and providers. Not dictators, not tyrants, not bullies, but rather leaders, protectors, and providers. So laying ourselves out like Christ in Ephesians 5:25, as St. Paul says, to sacrifice ourselves, to be everything that God has called us to be the man God has called us to be. So that's the life of Saint Ambrose. I would love to know, is there something there for you to reflect on? Leave a comment below. And is there a saint that you particularly are inspired by? Maybe I can create a video on that saint in the future. Otherwise, do me a favor, if you like seeing these kinds of videos, subscribe to the channel. This way you'll get notified when the next one comes out, and give it a thumbs up so we can reach more people. The next video, I'm going to dive into the life of Saint Ignatius of Antioch, who was eaten by lions in the Roman Colosseum in December of 107, 110-ish AD. He is an incredible rock star of the early church, and we're going to dive into his life in the next video. Until then, I'm praying for you, and I hope you'll pray for me, and may God richly bless you.